just welcome to everybody who's joining in. We were really happy that you could be here with us today. Jeff Toister is like a super expert in the training space, and I met him at ICMI doing some. He was doing some workshops that I got to participate in, and then just been following him ever since then. And so we've had an opportunity where Procedureflow plays in helping people to cut down their onboarding and training time and bring consistency. It's just a great relationship. And so we've been able to do, you can go on YouTube, type our two names together, and there's some stuff there that you can go watch from the past. So Jeff, it's great to have you here today on our webinar that we're doing. And I want to say congratulations for this book drop that you've just done. What books are obviously a ton of work to write and get published. And so congratulations on another book. And so just everybody knows, it's called The Guaranteed Customer Experience: How to Win Customers by Keeping Your Promises. If you get bored of us talking and you want to do something, go to guaranteedexperience.com, and you can sign up there to get like the first chapter, a little workbook, and get sort of an outline of what the book's going to be about, and then where to buy the book, obviously. And so the first 100 people that signed up for this are getting the book. And I haven't had a chance to read the entire book, but I did go through the first chapter and through the workbook that you provided, and I love it. Like, it's great, Jeff, and it gave me some really good thoughts about what we're doing with Procedureflow and the promises that we're making to our customers, both unsaid and maybe should be said, and all that kind of stuff. So congrats on the book. And just starting out, I would love for you, because I know people know who you are, and you've launched this book, and we're using just a subset of the book to do our webinar today, talk about consistency. But tell us a little bit about the book, why you're passionate about it, why you wrote it, what it means to you, and what you expect people to get out of it when they go ahead and tackle that head on.
Well, I really appreciate it, Micah. And first, thank you for putting this webinar together and putting the book into so many people's hands. So if you're signed in right now, you're getting a book. It's like you're Oprah today, Micah. You're getting a book, and you're getting a book. So I think we're off to a good start. I wrote the book to solve a problem that my audience is getting, which is, I think everybody, if you're on this webinar, we don't have to convince you that customer experience is important. You know it is. But the challenge you face is it's incredibly, incredibly complicated, and it's incredibly difficult. And I'll give you a simple story just from the customer's perspective. My wife and I like to go on a lot of road trips. And if you've been on a road trip before, one of the biggest challenges is just finding a clean restroom. And you might have done this thing where, like, you're driving by a gas station and it just looks so sketchy, and you're looking at how much gas you have left. You're kind of evaluating how long you can hold out. And you're like, let's keep going. And then you get to the next one and it looks okay, but you're not sure. And is it going to be closed? Will I need to get like a big tire with a key and then drag it through the parking lot to go to like an outhouse? Like, what's the situation?
Yep. The side, I have to interrupt you. It's the side bathroom for me. It's like the one that's not even part of the store. And you're right, like, they give you this crazy key to go out there. And I have 7 kids, and we road trip, and it's like you run out it's like an emergency, right? So it's like, oh no, it's one of the side bathrooms.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. And I don't know what it's like in Canada. I imagine it's fairly similar in the US. There was a study done by the travel app Gas Buddy. 40% of Americans worry about finding a clean restroom on a road trip. Now, there is a convenience store. Everybody's talking about favorite brands: Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out, Dove, Shake Shack, Amazon, Zappos. One of my favorite brands is a convenience store. It's a chain predominantly in Texas. And if you read the first chapter of the book, you can learn more about it. But it's a company called Buc-ee's. Mm-hmm. And Buc-ee's does a lot of things really well. But the thing that they use to bring in customers is they boast that they have the cleanest restrooms. And they can say this because ratings of over 8 million customers confirm it. And so why does no other gas station figure out that clean restrooms is something that is essential? I don't know, but Buc-ee's has figured this out. If you look at their Yelp reviews.
Can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
In the first chapter, you list out some of the road signs that you might see coming up on a Buc-ee's.
Billboards.
Can I read a couple of them out?
Sure.
Okay, the top two reasons to stop at Buc-ee's, number one and number two. Let us plan your next potty. Restrooms so clean, we leave mints in the urinals. Our aim is to have clean restrooms. Your aim will help. And your thrown awaits fabulous restrooms. So anyway, it made me chuckle and kind of, they're making a promise, right? Like if I stop there, I'm definitely gonna, have a good experience in the bathroom.
They are.
Sorry for.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine. But those are real billboards, and they tell you as a customer, hey, this place gets it. 46% of Yelp reviews about Buc-ee's mention the restrooms.
Crazy.
So they've figured out a problem that customers are trying to solve. And for some reason, their competitors have ignored this. And the Buc-ee's restrooms are fabulous. They are most of like the bigger ones. The restrooms themselves are bigger than a normal convenience store. They're spotless. They have employees that are patrolling them constantly. And then some of the newer ones, like in Katy, Texas, they have these little lights above the stalls. Red means stay away, occupied. Green means come on in.
Yeah.
Even that innovation. So being on a road trip and seeing how a company could figure out one thing that should be obvious but isn't, that's really what I was that was the epiphany, that we're trying to figure out customer experience and it's so difficult. What do we do about it? And so I realized that we can improve customer experience by using the framework of a guarantee. And there's only 3 steps we need to follow. The book outlines them all in step-by-step detail. But number one, we have to make our customers a promise that's valuable to them to solve a problem that our customers want to solve. The second step, we have to act on that promise. We have to deliver. And that's like saying, hey, we have clean restrooms, because some Buc-ee's competitors started saying, yeah, we have clean restrooms too. And you go there and no, you don't. So you have to deliver on that. But the third thing is, when something goes wrong, it's not really recovery. We've always focused on recovery, but it's deeper than that. It's restoring trust to say, hey, it went wrong this time, but we want to give you confidence that we'll do it right in the future. And I think most of the people tuning in today are in the customer service contact center world. Understand that by the time customers get to you, we're probably at that third step. Something went wrong. That's why they're contacting you. And the goal is to restore trust. So that's what the book is about, and why I wrote the book, because my audience is trying to solve that problem.
Okay. So you looked into the general broad array of customer experience, which I want to get to in a second in terms of defining it. But you looked across the spectrum and said, what are these standout companies perhaps doing a little bit different? And you identified that they basically audibly or, advertising wise, they're projecting out a promise that they're making to their customers, and then delivering on that promise, and then holding themselves to a standard if they don't hit that target.
And that's exactly it. And in the contact center world, I know you hear this, contact center professionals that are listening in today, what's one of our biggest challenges, if we're being honest? Marketing comes up with some new campaign. They tell everybody about it except us. And then customers call in and say, hey, I'm supposed to get this new promotion or whatever, and it's not working right. And that's the first time you're hearing about it. Broken promise, broken trust. So it does start often with marketing, goes through operations, and in customer service, we're on the back end. We're the superheroes that have to save the day, but sometimes we're in an awkward position.
Yeah, we find out about the marketing program from the customers essentially, but yeah. Now tying, I want to do a couple of things here. One is like, have you define CX for us in a broad sense, because it can get tricky. Like some people say, oh, CX call center, or oh, CX, some interaction with the company in a silo, but it's, it's broader than that, right? So can you just give us a little bit of a definition of what you call customer experience? What is it?
I can, and I think it's important we talk about this. One quick pause here. Zoe just put a link to Buc-ee's, to their about page, where you can see them talk about cleanest restrooms. So Zoe, thank you for that. And if you're tuning in today, you probably shared a question, many of you did, and we're going to get to your questions in just a moment. And then we're also, if you want to share a question that comes up about something Micah and I are talking about, share it in chat. If you will, click on panelists and attendees, and we'll answer some of your questions. So back to your question,
so
Mike.
Laura wrote there, and Laura, if it just says panelists, like we're the only people that see it, but we want everybody to see your stuff. So feel free to punch it out again. Go ahead, Jeff.
So a lot of people make this like a philosophical discussion. Well, I think customer experience is, well, I think, and if everyone has a different definition, we can't be consistent. So when I started writing the book, I realized one of the first things I have to do is define these things. So instead of me making up my own definition, I went to trusted, credible sources. And so the definition of customer experience, my favorite version, comes from a customer experience expert I really look up to, Annette Franz. And the definition that she has is so simple and straightforward, but it's daunting. And here's what it is. I'm going to paraphrase. Customer experience is the sum of all interactions a customer has with your brand and how they feel about those interactions. And so let's use Buc-ee's as an example. Those billboards, that's an interaction. I'm interacting with the brand in some way. The physical layout of their facilities, their social media presence. If I'm checking them out on Instagram going, oh, people really do like Buc-ee's. The restrooms themselves, of course, the employees. I own a Buc-ee's t-shirt. If I'm cruising around, I live about 1,000 miles from the nearest Buc-ee's, but if someone sees my t-shirt,
I'm a little surprised you don't have it on today.
Right?
I do. He does have one. I've seen it.
I do. It's too much, right? It's daunting. Customer service, where many of us focus, that is the advice or assistance that companies provide to customers who buy or use their products. And so one way to think about it, I sometimes think about those Russian stacking dolls, the Matryoshka dolls, where customer experience is like the biggest doll. And then you pull that open and you pull out like a smaller doll from inside. And that's customer service. It's part of customer experience, but it's not all of customer experience. A couple of people are asking for that definition. This is where it's awesome to have an audience. We already have a link to Annette's blog post. Thank you, Tony.
And that just came to us. That just came to us though, so it doesn't have panelists.
Oh, it just came to us. Oh, Tony, if you'd share it, panelists and attendees, you can toggle that in the chat. It's also in the book. So if you're like, oh, I didn't get that, it's in the book. It's in the first chapter. Amanda shared it as well. So thank you all. This is great. We have an audience that's on top of it.
Yeah. And I want to paraphrase it too, because it's good. It's the sum of all interactions, basically, like over time of a customer with your brand. And it's, as you said, it's everything from your advertising to your product to your customer support. But the second part that I really liked was like, it's the feels, it's the emotions, it's all the perception that's generated from those interactions. And that kind of holistically is CX. And I like that. And so the reason I asked you to define that up front, Jeff, was because I know the one thing that troubles me a little bit in going into a conversation like this with your book holistically is, if I work in a contact center, if I'm only answering the chats or taking the calls and it's all bad news coming in and I'm dealing with that, I feel like I don't have a lot of control over the whole organization's approach to making the promise and keeping the promise. I'm just picking up the pieces, right? And so there's a little bit of that feeling of like, oh, there's only so much I can control. So when we talk through today, we'll keep that audience in mind of like, we're picking up the pieces. And then but I want to make this point that's like, we don't just throw up our shoulders and go, well, there's nothing I can do about the promise. But when I went through your workbook and really worked through like this idea of the promise, what was interesting to me was that, like, I think a lot of us are not even writing it down. We're certainly not advertising it, but like, Tim Hortons doesn't have a roll up the rim commitment. It's just, they just did it, right? And they're not making any promise about it. So I think it's good for people to pull it out, work with their other departments and say, look, guys, I mean, we're not even making a promise to our customers, and then set up the process of clean bathrooms, execute on that, pick up the voice of the customer stuff, which we are tied into. So we can be responsible for the standard operating procedures of customer support, the reporting, the voice of the customer that comes out the back end, feeding it into the machine that delivers on the promise. But if your customer, like if your product or your brand or your company you work for does not have a promise today that you're making out loud on a billboard to your customers, start there, right? Like bring that up with your upper management. And so anyway, I just want to kind of throw that out front to say that the whole book, the whole premise is really exciting to me, even though there's only a portion of it that we can control.
Well, and I'll push back on that a little bit, because I think from a brand or organization standpoint, you are right. From an individual standpoint, we can control something. So for example, if I'm in a contact center and I have to do some research on an issue, and I say to my customer, I'm going to call you back by Friday at 5 o'clock. We know as customers that calls 50% chance at best that call happens, maybe worse. So that's an example, even at an individual level, of a broken promise. Or here's one that's even more common. I might say, oh, I'm so sorry that we sent you the wrong item. I'm going to send you the right one. Now, what customers don't realize, but in the contact center we do, I'm not actually going down to the warehouse and picking the correct item off the shelf and putting it on a box and then, traveling to your home or business and putting it on your doorstep. There are multiple people that are involved in keeping that promise. But part of it begins with me making sure that I enter the order correctly, that I track it, that I follow it. When I managed the contact center, one of the things we started doing was anytime a customer ordered express shipping, so anything faster than normal ground, we would proactively track it. And this is back before everything was online and automated. So we would actually track the package, and we would do a follow-up call or email to the customer, one, to make sure they got it, and two, to make sure everything checked out. And the reason we did that is if they upgraded shipping, they probably wanted it faster for a reason. And so many times when we did that, we found out something was wrong. And so there are things we can do in the contact center to keep our own promises, but then do a better job of being stewards of the organizational promises that are being made, and to take more ownership of that.
Yeah, 100%. So we titled this kind of a Q&A. We wanted to sort of open it up and really tackle the questions that people had coming in. You guys entered in questions as you came in. So we've got a whole bunch of those. Thank you guys, everybody, for the questions that you asked. They were all great. And so do you want to launch into that, Jeff, or is there anything else that you want to kind of say before we start getting into the
No, the promise is their questions. So we better start answering them. And if you have questions that come up during the conversation and you're attending today, please share it via chat. We're going to do some live questions as well.
Awesome. So yeah, do you have, was there a couple that when you read through the 100 or so, questions that people had, was there a couple that stood out to you immediately?
There were only because they're questions that I see and hear a lot.
Yeah.
Would you like to know what they are?
I would. Yeah.
So the number one question that stood out for me was about the wow factor, and I'm going to paraphrase one of them, but I think we got a lot that were like this. How can I help my agents find ways to go above and beyond for the customers and exceed their expectations? That was probably number 1, 2, and 3 on my list, because I hear that so often.
So we have the leaders, Zappos, and others that, you mentioned Chewy's kind of doing this as well. But, the expression is, don't just solve their problem, order them pizza and, send them flowers. And like, right. It's like, put the wow factor in there. And so, yeah, talk about that. You talk about your opinion a little bit there. I have a couple of thoughts there too.
So beyond opinion, there's been research done on this. And in the book, I actually included part of an interview that I did with Matt Dixon. If you don't know Matt Dixon, he's one of the co-authors of The Effortless Customer Experience. Great book. And their research, they started this research project trying to figure out, well, what's the value of wow? If we're wowing people in a customer service context, what do we get as a business in return for that? I know customers say, hey, we're a customer for life. What do we actually get? The surprising conclusion was we get nothing. There's no lift in terms of loyalty by wowing customers. And if you break that down a little bit, I think one thing we have to understand in service, by the time they come to us, wows they're very situational. And most of the time, what we're really doing is restoring trust. The opportunity to wow, those opportunities are few and far between. Like a few people mentioned Chewy's. And Chewy is a place to go. If you're a pet owner, Chewy will send flowers if they find out that your pet died.
Hmm.
Well, let's hope my pet doesn't die for a long, long time.
Mhm.
So Chewy won't have an opportunity to send flowers. That might be a wow moment. But what about a couple of times a month when I'm just ordering more food or treats or more poop bags, right?
Yeah.
Those aren't necessarily wow moments. So I think we have to step away from this wow moment. And what really is going to win customer loyalty is keeping the promises that we made. So if I order something online, it better show up. And if it doesn't show up, the challenge for I think a lot of our audience today is that's when we get into the picture, is they're coming to us to say, hey, I ordered something, it's not right, or it didn't show up. Can you fix it? So the wow moment
Yeah.
is often past.
So I agree with that. I think that the effortless experience opened up my eyes to that, the idea that when people call in with challenges, what they really want is a frictionless experience to get their problem solved, because they're calling you with a failure of the company in some way. And so you quickly and efficiently and consistently solve their problem, right? And that's ultimately how you shave off that disloyalty. The idea that you can create loyalty is kind of in question, but you can certainly diminish the amount of disloyalty that you're going to get, which is, I think, a lot of us what we're fighting. Now, in your book, you talk a little bit about recovery, as it's kind of at the tail end of like, okay, we made the promise, we've got the procedure for the promise, we're measuring, and then we failed, and now we're recovering. And so, can you give a little bit of a framework there on what that recovery means in terms of like, maybe if we de-emphasize the wow, but we just say, we need, because there was a lot of questions about empathy. There's a lot of questions about like, does my agent really care about the situation this person's in? Can you talk about the recovery a little bit?
So let's look at both from the customer standpoint and the agent standpoint, because those perspectives, I think, are both extremely important, but both very different.
Mm.
From the customer standpoint, by the time they get to the customer service team, it's usually because trust has been broken in some way. Something went wrong. And there's two components to this. There's the rational issue, that I got the wrong item, or the balance on my account is wrong, or the software is not working, whatever it is. And then there's the emotional component behind it, the frustration, whatever that problem is really causing for that customer. I just had an issue, a friend of mine who was ordering propane, lives in a rural area where he depends on propane to keep his house warm and to be able to cook food. That's very important. And so filling the propane tank is the problem, but really the emotions behind it are the worry of, I'm going to freeze in this winter. I won't be able to cook food. I have to call day after day after day to get this propane delivered. That's really the issue. And still restoring trust isn't delivering the propane. Restoring trust to that customer is really to prove, hey, we let you down by not delivering when we said we would. We're going to prove to you that we're back on track and you don't have to worry about propane anymore. And so from a customer perspective, that's really what we're doing, is we're making it feel better that we've got this. Now, the agent perspective, if we look at how we train agents, the workflow that we ask our agents to do, the agent role is usually focused not on, hey, why did the propane not get delivered when it should have been? And I'm getting this call, and they've called several times. The agent's trained to focus on, you need to get propane delivered, so I'll leave a note for the delivery driver and get it on the schedule. So they're focused often on the wrong issue, which is getting the propane is fine, but they're not trained to listen to that emotion behind the customer and say, wow, we've really let you down. I'm going to figure out why this keeps happening so it doesn't happen again. And that's where the empathy comes in, but it's also part of the recovery. What agents should really be doing is starting the process of restoring trust. And going back to my friend, there's only so many calls you can make when you're worried about, am I going to freeze? He's got a new propane company.
Yep. And there's so many questions tied into that sort of idea of like identifying what the real problem is. And I think shortcutting a listening issue? Like, are you really listening, or are you digging enough or asking enough probing questions to really get what it is that the customer is trying to say, not just jump to some procedure that you're going to execute? So do you have any tips that would kind of cover off that base in terms of like how to help that agent unearth that a little bit?
I do, and it's interesting because I think a lot of us, and there's a few questions around this, how can I, here's one in particular, how can I help my employees practice active listening? I think we should understand that we know how to listen. And one of the challenges is that in the contact center, we create barriers to listening that we don't always identify. And I'll give you a few examples. One is the queue. So if I have a number of calls in queue or a number of emails or chats in queue, and my agents can see that, that creates a very natural urge to speed through the contact because the queue is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. That erodes listening. The workflow is another place that we can look. If I am required by the call script or the way the screens are laid out in our CRM system to ask for certain information up front, how many times as a customer do you call and say, my problem is this? And they're like, hold on. I need your name. I need your address. I need your birth date, your mother's maiden name, a blood sample. And if we require our agents to put all these roadblocks up, again, it erodes listening. Mm-hmm. Another example, and this is almost, I think, counterintuitive, but if we are talking to our agents about quality, but not the intent behind the quality, then the agent is focused on, well, I have to check the box on all these items on the form, but I'm not necessarily engaged with the customer. So I'm supposed to say, how are you today? So I say it, but I don't really care what the answer is. And so if you say, I'm terrible, well, I'm moving on to the next question because I don't care. And so sometimes even quality pushes agents to do the wrong thing versus listening. So as a contact center, identify and remove some of those roadblocks to listening, and our natural listening skills will emerge.
Yeah. And I had a thought too. There was one of the questions that was about, it seems a little bit counter to what we're talking about in terms of like we're trying to solve some of this problem, but it's like, how do we improve upsell, or how do we sort of help customers to understand the value of other products or features that we might have that would benefit them, more holistically think about and proactively think about the customer's situation. You okay if I share, there's like a marriage course thing that I took?
Oh boy, is this going to get weird?
No.
Okay.
So it was like, if you're having a fight with your spouse or whatever,
gotcha.
The idea was to kind of sit down and then use this formula, and it works great. Like I've used it a lot. And basically the idea is you say, tell me what happened. And then you say, how did that make you feel? And it's interesting, the two answers are different. Like when they tell you what happened and then when they tell you how it feels, you think they're going to be the same thing, and they end up being kind of different. So then you repeat it back to them. You say, okay, this happened. It made you feel like this. Did I get it right? They might say yes. They might say no. They say no, go back, repeat, and keep doing it until you get it right. And then you come back. There might be three things or whatever. Mm-hmm. You come back out the other end, and then you can't be defensive. You can't interrupt. And then the last thing is you say, and how would you see this being fixed? Like what would your solution to this look like? And let them come up with the answer. And I just, over top of that whole thing, I would just put the word venting, like you just let these people, express their frustration and express it. And then I think somewhere in that framework, you get the real thing that they're like, your propane situation where it's like, I'm afraid that I'm going to be freezing to death in the middle of the winter because you guys don't show up, as opposed to like, the truck coming, right? So that little, it works in relationships. It works. I do it with my daughter when she's really upset. It works great, and probably helps the customer. The only thing how did that make you feel might be a little tricky in some situations. So you might have to guess and say, I bet that made you really upset, or, something, because it's a little hokey to say, how did that make you feel when somebody's raging? But so what's another one you saw? Like, so we have, we covered off a lot of ground there, but it's like, we talked about wow versus kind of what is it, how do we avoid losing loyalty and then just get this more frictionless experience? We talked about listening, empathy, upselling. What were some other ones there that you liked? and I'm trying to bridge back to our theme,
Yeah.
which is consistent customer experience.
Sometimes I think there's a lot of surprises between what we've been taught as contact center leaders and the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of these questions actually reflect, for me, lessons that I had to learn the hard way. And a couple that stand out. One is metrics. A lot of us are worried about metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And metrics can often produce the wrong behaviors versus the right behaviors. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We'll go back to productivity, like average handle time, how many emails can you handle, how many chats can you handle, et cetera. Those metrics tend to erode listening. But here's something really fascinating. And I did an experiment with this more than 20 years ago. And then I've had other contact center leaders replicate this experiment, and it delivers very consistent results. If you take the metric of handle time, for example, away from your agent, so your workforce planners are still looking at it, your manager, supervisor still looking at it, but your agent is told, focus on the customer in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And focus on handling their issue and restoring trust on that first contact. Two things happen that are pretty amazing. One is, of course, they naturally do a better job of handling that issue on the first contact and making the customer happy. But the counterintuitive thing is average handle time either stays the same or it often goes down a little bit. And I'll give you a little bit of a insight as to why that happens. With the real difficult problems, if I'm worried about handle time and I don't do a good enough job listening to you, it actually makes the conversation go longer because customers really push back a lot more when they don't feel like you're listening. They're more accepting of your ideas when they feel like you are. But the other side of it is agents have admitted to me that, let's say that handle time average target is 5 minutes. If they get a call that's 2 minutes and they could make the customer ecstatic and just be done and get the customer on their way, they feel like they still have some extra time in the bank. So they often will stretch the shorter calls longer than they should.
Okay.
And so if you look at your short contacts, your short calls, you'll often find waste there as well. And so that's one of those things where metrics can drive.
Is that kind of like government spending where they have a certain budget and then they have to spend it all or they don't get it next year, kind of.
Yeah. Metrics often drive the wrong behaviors. There was another question that I got that I think I see a lot of, some version of, how can I improve my team's soft skills? And they're worried about, with upset customers, angry customers, and those types of situations. So as a trainer, I don't know if you know this, or the audience does. Do you know the origin of the term soft skills? Like, do you know where it comes from or
No,
what it originally meant?
Nope.
So soft skills we now use today to mean like interpersonal skills, but the term originally came from lazy trainers. And what I mean is, if I teach you how to use a computer system or a machine or drive a car, we often just call those skills. But as trainers, we'll call those hard skills. And why is that? Because I can see if you can do it. Okay, go use the machine, go use the computer system, go drive the car. I can watch you do it. Oh, now you know how, or, oh, you crashed into a tree. I guess you don't know how to drive just yet.
Yeah.
Trainers call soft skills because, well, I haven't really defined what good looks like. I haven't bothered to identify what are the behaviors I should see that tell me you know how to do this. And the problem with that is that's not actually training. So what a good trainer will do is throw out the term soft skills and say a skill is a skill. Some are easier to spot and identify than others. But if I want to give you the skills to de-escalate an angry customer, I have to break that down into observable behaviors, because then I can say, here are the specific behaviors you need to demonstrate. Here is how to demonstrate them. And then as a trainer and later on as a quality assurance team or a supervisor, I can evaluate whether or not those behaviors were correctly demonstrated. So the whole idea, if we get rid of the term soft skills and let's just make them skills and clearly define them, that's a big part of this bigger picture we've talked about of consistency. Consistency is a lot easier if we're consistent about how we define something.
That's interesting. It's kind of sparked for me a story where like we're working with a customer and mapping out their procedures, and we're thinking about kickback, like when will customers be upset, and then putting, flows in that will handle those kickback situations. And so one of them was like a person would receive this tax form because they hit a certain threshold of sales and they weren't expecting it. And so they start panicking and they call in, right? And so, handling that kickback is just about saying, well, what about refunds? Did you take refunds into consideration? And so if they, oh, shoot, yeah, there were some refunds and that put it over the top, right? And now I got to do this tax thing. So that it's like, we're programming it into the flows to take what the best people do and how they're successful on those kind of calls, passing that along to the newbies so that they can exercise those best behaviors as well. And so it is more systematic sometimes than you think it is, in terms of like, you don't just intuitively know how to do everything. Like sometimes you need some help and best practices passed along.
Micah, we're getting some good questions here in the chat as well. As I wonder if we can maybe pick one or two of these to come to
sure.
the live questions.
What do you like in there?
Well, so one of them is interesting, and it's kind of a piggyback on what we had asked about earlier. And I don't think everybody can see this one. Lori asked, what is your opinion on wowing in a world where many are now expecting you to give so much? Like the point is not all companies can give away products or even send flowers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wonder, I want to ask you a question as a customer, can you easily think of a time when a contact center has wowed you? And that's okay, right? I want everybody to look at this. This is a real reaction. It's hard to do in most contexts. By the way, Micah, my answer would be identical to yours. I don't have many examples at the ready. I can tell you many that what's the opposite of wow. But here's why, to Lori's question, here's why I don't think we need to worry about sending flowers or some other gimmick. Those are highly, highly situational. And I mean, it's okay in some situations. Like I'll give you a Zappos behind the scenes. Zappos has these stations in their physical contact centers where you can make a handwritten card to send to somebody. So there's construction paper and markers and all kinds of stuff. It's a small item, but all they're really doing is facilitating for those moments when it's called for that you can send somebody a handwritten note. That doesn't cost a lot of money. But I would still argue that it's not, it's really not the card or the flowers or anything. It goes back to, what did you promise to your customers? And if you promise something that's meaningful and you execute on that promise, and then if something goes wrong, you restore faith that you can deliver on that promise yet again, that's really the issue. And so I'll give you two examples, one company that did it, one company that did not. I'm a huge fan of the shoe company, Samuel Hubbard. And they make fantastic shoes that are amazingly comfortable, that are supposed to last a long, long time. And I had a new pair of shoes that started ripping inside. The liner started ripping, which is very unusual. I took a couple of pictures, sent it to the customer service team. That is a break in confidence. And they restored confidence by immediately replying and saying, I'm so sorry, that's not what normally should happen. I'm going to send you a new pair of shoes. Don't worry about doing anything with the shoes you already have. And the new pair of shoes are wearing great. They're super comfortable. That was a pretty great recovery experience. There's another company, I will not name them, because I did the same thing. The product broke prematurely. I sent pictures and I didn't hear back. That's controllable. Whether or not you respond to your customer emails, that's controllable. I went on social media. Hey, I emailed, didn't get a response. Can you help me? Oh, we're so sorry, but we can't help you. Why don't you try emailing?
Yeah.
So they didn't even bother to take that extra step to go down the hall or wherever it was to give my message to the right department. So I had to contact them a third time. On the third contact, they said, oh, we're so sorry. We'll send you out a free replacement. I'm not loyal to that company because they put friction in the process of recovering trust. where Samuel Hubbard was like, oh, that's not how we do business. Let's fix this right away. So back to Lori's questions, it's really not about flowers. That's not what's going to win. What's going to win is do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't, because we all have those failure points, fix it immediately so the customers now can trust your brand again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There was a bunch of questions. This one's a little bit biased, I guess, towards Procedureflow, but I did see a lot of questions about information accuracy, about improving confidence, about those types of efficiency things. There is a large, we talk about this all day with our customers and prospects, which is like, you have a short window of time with these folks where they do this job, they don't do it forever. There's a large multi-month period where they're trying to figure out the 500 to 2,000 calls that are coming in just practically. And then there's this, so, how do you shorten that onboarding time so that they're more effective sooner and can provide and deliver that great customer experience and consistently across the whole group of 100 or 200 or even more than that agents doing that work. So can you talk to that a little bit? Like, what are some of your methods and things you advise people when you're doing consulting on that pragmatic aspect of they need to be able to handle 500, 2,000 different kind of calls?
We are, then I'm speaking as an adult learning professional, memorizing information is extremely difficult, especially for adults. And we put a lot of mental or cognitive burden on people when we say you have to memorize the answers to these 500 questions. And because half the time you're memorizing the answer to a question you won't hear again for months. And when you do hear that question, you've forgotten the answer anyways. I've learned as a contact center trainer, as a contact center manager, as a contact center consultant, that you can consistently cut new hire training time by 50% or more by removing the burden of having to memorize all this information, because people get things wrong. I was reading an article just today. Our memories are often faulty. And so I don't want to rely on people giving out the wrong information or inconsistent information. What I want to do instead is give them a tool, knowledge-based, like Procedureflow, or I've had clients, they just put things in an Excel spreadsheet with links to the right spots on the intranet or in SharePoint or Teams or wherever you keep stuff, and just have people go to one consistent source. And instead of knowing the answers to those 500 questions, you only need to know one answer, which is, where do I find it? And once you know where to find it, now everybody goes to the same source and they get the answer right every time. That's a very, very efficient way to overcome that challenge. And it cuts your new hire training down significantly at the same time. So it saves you money.
Yeah, and I'm going to advertise the session that you and I did together, where you actually did a full PowerPoint presentation on cutting your onboarding time. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Procedureflow and Jeff Toister, there'll be one there that says, how to dramatically reduce onboarding time. And you had 3 really great framework pieces for how you dig into that and rethink and reprogram the way your training program is set up, so that you're training, teaching a man to fish right from day one, versus trying to do the memorization stuff. And I really enjoyed your session when you did that. So.
Oh, I appreciate that. We have another question. I want to see if I can get to this one, Mike. This one came from Jeffrey Brown. And by the way, folks, if you'd like to ask some questions, please share. We hope that you will toggle that chat function to panelists and attendees. Other people can see your questions as well. We see how helpful the audience is by sharing additional resources. But Jeffrey asked, can you help me understand how to get what is meaningful for the customer? And I think that's a good question. It goes to the heart of what's the customer's true problem or true issue. And I think in some instances, customers aren't good at telling their stories. And other times they're telling their stories and we're just not listening. So often a customer's not good at telling their story when they call in and they say, does your software have this feature? Well, they're not really telling us why. And in that case, I think before we just jump in and say yes or no, we should ask them, tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish. And it's helpful, I think, for agents to have some really good questions at the ready. When I hear these types of questions, I want to know the motivation behind it. And once they tell us what they are trying to accomplish, then we have a better understanding. We can better frame it. And I'll give you a simple example. A contact center agent gets a call, and this is a telecommunications company, and they say, I need to know how to set up my voicemail. Okay, well, that's pretty transactional. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever go out of office? Are you going to need to change that voicemail message from time to time? I am. I want people to know how to reach me. So that's the real issue, isn't it? When I call, I get voicemail, I want people to know how to reach me. So the agent, based upon that second question, was saying, well, while I have you on the phone, let's walk through how to set your out of office message. And so that second question reveals it. Now, sometimes customers will share the information and we'll just bulldoze right through it. We won't listen to it. So one of the challenges my friend with the propane problem was having was he was saying, I'm running out of propane. I need to be able to make sure I can keep my house warm. When is the propane going to arrive? So he said he was really transparent about the problem, but the agent didn't listen to the first part of it. They were only looking for what's the part where I do something? What's the part where I jump into action? And so we really need to have our agents do a better job of listening fully and trying to hear the emotion behind it. The emotion from my friend was worry. He was worried about running out of propane. And if that's ever happened to you, there's a lot of people, if you're in Texas, you know what it's like to be without power or without heat for a long period of time. That was a big problem that happened not too long ago. It's a huge worry. It's very disruptive. It's costly. It's potentially deadly. And as an agent, you have to be able to spot that and say, I've got you. Here's what we're going to do to make sure you don't run out and you stay warm. But if you're not listening for all that, then all you'll say is, we'll get you on the schedule.
Yeah. That's great. And I have actually a story I want to add in there. But before I do that, I just want to say to anybody who's posting chat questions in there, whether they're visible to everybody or not, we're collecting them all, and we'll probably reach out to you afterwards and try to answer your question specifically. And Jeff's also offered graciously to do a little write-up tackling the major themes of answering some of the questions you're asking. And so we'll reach out for follow-up if we didn't quite understand your question, or Jeff will have some general answers that we'll blog about later. And so our team is going to follow up with your email on giving you access to the recording, the Jeff's write-up and stuff too. So just don't panic if we're not able to quite get to everything that you're asking in the chat. The one thing I wanted to add in there, Jeff, was I had this banking experience working on Procedureflow, and all I was doing was listening to people that had 10 weeks training come out and start taking their first calls. And the agents lose control really quickly, and it happens with the probing questions. And so I know it's a couple of people hit on this, and it's like, I can't tell you how important probing questions are. And you have to program that. You have to feed that into them when they hit a certain scenario. These are what our best people ask up front. And this example was this guy called and he just wanted to print off like a balance from his bank. And he was asking how to do it, but he didn't have all the gear and he couldn't do this browser thing. And the person just kept saying, well, you could try like this, you could try like this, you could try like this. And then finally the person just goes, well, you're going to have to go to the branch. And the guy flipped out and he was just like, the branch is 4 hours away. You know what I mean? Like, and so I was like, whoa. And anyway, in the end, it turns out the guy wanted to get a car loan and he just needed it, like the information to get to that place. And the agent could have faxed the information to the car dealership if he just given them, if he got the fax number. And I just thought, man, that could have been like a 1 minute. Oh, great. I'll fax that to the car loan place with one probing question, right? Like, what are you trying to do? And so I think the onus is on us when we program our training and onboarding that we set up the scenarios and we tell them the questions to ask up front. And what do you learn from that? And where do you go with that? And so that's a big part of what we do with Procedureflow when we do the mapping sessions early on. And yeah, I can't say enough about probing questions.
And one of the things that I would add to that is find your Betty. And what I mean by find your Betty is I remember one of the first times I realized that agents understood a whole lot more than management was we were trying to solve a problem and we just weren't able to. And I found that like one agent, her name was Betty, her results were off the charts. And so I just went and I sat with Betty, and her approach was so different than everyone else's. And I realized that's, you know, when you're programming these questions, be prepared to adjust them based upon what your agents discover. Do you want to trust the agent who takes, you know, 100 calls a day and has figured out through trial and error a really good way to handle something, or the supervisor who might take 5 calls a week and thinks they have a good idea of the best way to do it? I'm going to go to the agent who's nailed it because they have so much more experience. And your agents will appreciate knowing, oh, this flow, this procedure came from my peers who figured out the best way to do it. I'll give it a try.
Yep, 100%. Go find, and you can do it. Go get the metrics: best average handle time, best quality, best customer satisfaction. Don't skimp on any one of those, because if they have short average handle time, bad CSAT, you know what I mean? Like, get the whole flavor of it. Go find that person, map out what they know, and everybody benefits. So that's a great point, Jeff. We are going to run out of time here at some point, and we do know that people have to hit meetings at the hour, and we'll kind of let people come and go. We probably have time for one more question. Then I might just again tell people, if they weren't the top 100, if they kind of missed that and they wanted to get your book, we'll do a couple of details there. But one more question maybe, and one parting thought, and then we'll give some more information.
Sounds good. Pick the question, Michael. Throw it at me. We have so many good ones to choose from.
Okay. I would say help agents understand the value of customers spending money with us. Like, we have an agent that's making not a ton of money. They're going to come and go from this call center. Give me a reason to care about this customer's situation, about them at all. Like, how do I get these agents to understand that every one of these customers is a customer, and they spend money with us, and they probably want to continue to be customers? That's a tough question.
It is. I haven't seen that approach work very well, quite frankly. The idea that, you know, if we're nice to customers, they'll come back, and the agent will be like, well, how does that help me? Here's what I have seen work, and work really, really well. And this goes back to some of these myths I think we've talked about. If you've hired correctly, you've hired people who want to help. So they walk in the door with this idea that they're going to help customers. If you've not hired correctly, then you're in trouble. But if, let's say you've hired good people, they come in the door, and we see this in training. They're eager. They want to create good experiences for customers. The myth is that our agents need to be motivated to do all of these things. And I say it's a myth because the reality is they had motivation. Where did it go? The real challenge in the contact center is preventing demotivation. And as leaders, we need to figure out what makes them demotivated so they don't want to help customers anymore, or don't try as much. And there's a few places to look. One, go talk to them. They'll tell you. If you ask them, they'll tell you. Agents frequently get frustrated having to solve the same problem over and over and over again, and having no one listen to say, I think I know what we could do to fix this. They're frustrated by systems that don't work, or having 7 different computer screens I got to pull up just to be able to find a simple answer. They're frustrated by having to ask for permission to do really no-brainer, easy things. And they're frustrated by having to search endlessly just to give the right answer to questions that customers feel like they really ought to know. So talk to your agents, and if you figure out what's frustrating them and you can remove those obstacles, they'll still care about helping customers, which I think is what we're ultimately trying to get to.
I heard one center, and they do something that I think is really cool, because it falls in line with something I heard, which is really extreme. Rent the Runway. Their agents will, when they hit a problem that's significant in their call center, they'll hang up their headset, go into the building, and do root cause analysis and fix the problem before they come back to work as an agent. I understand everybody can't do that, but if you think about the continuous improvement loop on that, on fixing your product, your company, everything, that's an amazing ownership thing that makes that person really feel like the coming to work is meaningful. The variation that I saw of that can work for a lot of people is they actually schedule the agents every X number of weeks to go into this brain center, and they'll take like 10 of them at a time. And so you write down all the things that you think the company should fix, you bring them to those meetings, and then they do this multi-week brainstorming working session where they interdepartmentally try to fix problems. A little bit of ownership goes a long way in terms of, you know, making people feel like, because when you feel like you can't change it, then like you're just delivering the same answer and over and over again, you know what I mean? Any parting thoughts before I recommend the book again?
I think it really has to be simple. If we want to create consistently great customer experiences, simplify things. You know, the story I told you at the beginning about Buc-ee's, they focused on clean restrooms. That's not rocket science. That's easy. That doesn't cost money. It's easy. So if we simplify things, we make sure we all know this is what we're promising to our customers, and we continuously have the conversation around how do we keep that promise? And if something goes wrong, how do we restore trust?
Yeah.
Then customer experience will automatically get better.
Amazing. So I got great notes out of just the outline for your book, which I plan to get the book and sort of fully read the stories behind the outline. But I just want to recommend again for everybody, for those that will be part of the top 100, you'll get the book. But also, I mean, go here anyway, guaranteedexperience.com, because you can immediately get chapter 1, go through that, and you'll get this workbook, you'll get this framework. And I love those workshop booklets that you do, Jeff, because it's like, it forces me to think about procedure flow. Like I inserted procedure flow into it. I'm not just reading about Buc-ee's. And then I'm going, oh, what is procedure flow's commitment? What is our promise? You know, and it is, by the way, to reduce onboarding time by over 50%. And then it's like, okay, what are the standard operating procedures we have to set up to make that successful? What do we do when we don't always deliver on that promise, etc.? So get the book, read it, do the workshop stuff, make your business better, make your customers happy. Thank you, Jeff, for being with us here today. Again, it was really fun. And I thank you for everybody for attending. We'll be sending out lots of material to your email, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you all.